Okay, go. Welcome to the Calzone. This episode is one of the Thesis interviews finding out how entrepreneurs are using their podcast to help their business. I hope y'all enjoy. Hey, Jason, thank you so much for doing this. This is awesome.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Fantastic. Man, I'm looking at the movies that you produced and holy shit, they're awesome movies.
Well, thank you. I don't know if you're looking at all the big movies. Those are location manager movies. I didn't produce all those big ones, but I did work on them exclusively and extensively.
Oh wow, what
So
do you
the
do for them?
producing ones. Well, I used to be a location manager, which meant that a studio exec, a director, or a producer will call me and say, "Hey, I want to do a movie in Louisiana. I want to send you the script. Do you think we can do it there?" And then I go out and I take a bunch of photographs of what I portray as the story that I've read on the paper and say, "Look, I think these are the perfect locations for it." And then if they like it, they say, "Great, can you budget it for us and tell us how much you think it would cost to actually shoot in these locations?" And then I do, and then they would end up, landing here in Louisiana. So I ended up doing, I don't know, a slew of movies for 8 or 9 years as a location manager, from Dawn of the Planet of the Apes to Terminator Genesis to Twilight Saga, Break Dawn, all kinds of crazy movies like that. And then I started a studio. Actually, it was 9 years this September, in Chalmette, and I've now brought 40 movies to this facility. So it's been a good long run in the film industry here in Louisiana.
I like that the name of the rooms are the big and the easy.
Yeah, we got rock, paper, scissors, and we have big and easy.
That's perfect.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
yeah,
What,
man.
what got you into the production game, the studio game?
I started as an actor, and I began to slowly lose my beautiful Jewish hair. That started going pretty quickly at an early age. I was like, you know what, I'm not going to look good in front of a camera anymore. And I actually realized I liked telling the story. I didn't really like being in the story. And so I started editing, and then I got into director of photography, and then I got into sound. I just wanted to learn everything. And so I started producing, and then I needed to make money, which moved me into location managing. And then I really wanted to do something bigger. So I started a studio. I picked up a piece of property on a movie and partnered with a couple of people in the area. And now we have 28 acres and 350,000 square feet of space. So it's good.
Wow. And
Yeah.
so is this where that would be where they shoot the movie? So it's like an indoor facility, is it indoor outdoor? How does that work?
It's both. What it is it's I took over two former blighted big box stores. The first being an old Lowe's Home Improvement, and at first I rented it and then I bought it, and so that's a big 157,000 square foot building, and then I divided it up into four spaces, three of them being soundstage spaces, and one of them being a big mill, so they can come in and we can prep all the sets. And then I took over a grocery store next door, which is a 62,000 square foot facility, and converted it into two, which is big and easy. And then we had an office complex next door, and then we bought another one down the way. So we have two huge office complexes and two former blighted big box stores. And then I also have about 11 acres of flat top parking lot. And so we've built, sets like the Deepwater Horizon Plaza of the oil rig and the derrick of the oil rig and the 405 for Bill and Ted's Face the Music that just came out a couple of years ago. It was all shot here. And we built the French Quarter for Interview with the Vampire. And so it's been a really great run and a really great asset to have indoor and exterior opportunities for our clients to come and shoot their shows.
Absolutely. And how does it work for getting a client? Do they hit you up or is it word of mouth? Do you know people? Is that the story?
So it's the ladder to the front. So I began as location. So everybody used to call me for movies they were trying to bring here. So I had a really good network of people. Over the 8, 9 years of location managing. And then when I started the studio, they would still call me thinking I was location manager. And I was like, look, I would help you in locations. I'll scout for you, but I'm not in that business anymore. I have a studio. And so obviously that began to parlay into, oh, you have space available. That's great. And so that began about a 2 or 3 year process of me sort of switching gears into studio executive mode, where people started to recognize me as a brick and mortar versus a service. And so, yeah, I just built up a great brand. The brand is the Ranch Film Studios, and now I get calls left and right. I don't have to do as much active marketing or seeking out sales, as people now call me as one of the first or second calls in the state of Louisiana to really find out if they can shoot their movie here.
Wow, congratulations. I love the story. I've been talking to people through this thesis and through all different walks of life. Like one guy was, a really amazing doctor, oncologist, and
Mhm.
then all the way to Poppy Tooker with Louisiana Eats to Out to Lunch podcast with Peter Raschuti on business, and just to get the different
I was on Out
perspectives.
to Lunch a couple times.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? No way.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
amazing. Did
Yeah.
you do it at the Commander's Palace or at the new one?
No, we did it during COVID, so we actually didn't do it during lunch. So it was one of these Zoom things where he's like, "Man, I really want to have you. Unfortunately, we can't do lunch." So anyway, it was a good time.
That's really cool. That's amazing.
Mhm.
So tell me about how'd you get into the podcast? I see you have like 16 episodes out right now.
So, so the podcast space has always been an interesting space for me. I obviously listen to a lot of podcasts. I really love the long form format of storytelling, and I'm a producer as well. So I mentioned all this about location managing and now being a studio exec and owning and operating a real estate play. I've always been a creative. I've always been creating, been more or less a weekend warrior, trying to figure out how to make independent projects work. And I did one with our mutual friend Chris Poche, who directed a lovely feature film. I've done a couple before that and a few after that. But when we were talking about COVID a second ago, when COVID sort of hit, we were in a place where indie film was really starting to hit a decline. And then when the budget swelled because the price to pay for crews to be on a set because of all the things that you needed, the PPE you needed for COVID, the budgets ballooned. And so a lot of independent film was really having a tough time getting financing. And so I had about 12 different pieces of intellectual property at the time and was really just pushing hard to try to get something to work. And I was like, how else can I build an audience? And podcasts are really happening. And I was like, man, why don't we build long form stories or episodic stories with podcasts? And so I began pitching that to a couple of my partners. We loved the idea. We had one specific project that we were really pushing hard, which was called Journalista, which is about a woman who's actually from New Orleans with Nicaraguan descent that gets, would spend her summers in Nicaragua with all her friends and gets caught up in this 1980s Iran Contra affair, where she became the fixer, if you will, of the journalists that were there, the ABC, NBC, and CBS journalists. And she became a journalist herself over about an 8 or 9 year span while this war was going on, and ended up blowing the lid off the Iran Contra affair. You have to go check it out to get into more details about that. But the
I love
way
that story. The
that's
Iran Contra affair it's the most wild story in recent American history to me. Like, wow.
it
That
is, and it's cool to see that your generation is catching on to those stories that obviously my generation had seen at a younger clip, catching our government in just the wackiest of situations. And it's just it's a tale that I think will resonate with so many folks, with us who understand and know a bit of the story and want to dive into it even deeper. And then with you all who are intrigued about, how things actually progressed and functioned foreign, government wise, and with us here in America. It's a wild story. You got to go check it out. Obviously, if you or any of your friends haven't, she's a wild woman. She admits to a lot of wild atrocities she went through her partying realm back in the day, but then became a warrior journalist for the people, and worked with some of the greats like Jane Wallace in getting them the stories that were necessary for us to hear about the atrocities that were happening during that time. But the way that we decided to go about a podcast is that we had been pitching studios. We wanted this to be an episodic series, and so we've been pitching studios. We had a beautiful deck. We had put together a short sizzle, a little bit of a video reel, 2 to 3 minutes long. And we were out. We had a lot of bites. A lot of people were very interested. We went into 2 and 3 and sometimes 4 creative meetings before finally we were given hey, this is not the right time. You know, just a number of factors, whether it was political stuff that was happening in, you know, early 2020 into 21 as we were trying to figure out what was going on with our lives coming out of COVID, and obviously the backlog of all the content that was trying to be produced all during that time that had gotten halted. So we got in a really interesting mix of hey man, this is the perfect project for this right place, but it's just, you know, a timing thing. So we said, look, we're going to go build an audience on our own. And so I had a good friend who's in the radio business, and I was like, listen, you know, I'm really looking to push this out to some podcasts. Do you have some great platforms that you could connect me to? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. And he connected us to 3 or 4 of them. One of them he had a good relationship with at iHeartRadio, and immediately when we opened the door with him, the first interview, they had already read all the material, and they were like, what do we need to do to get this? They were like, this is awesome. This is right up our alley. We love what y'all are trying to do with it, obviously, and making it into a series. And how can we be a part of it? And so it was one of those easy sells, because they're not always easy. They're usually a lot of hard no's, and hopefully your audience and the peers that you're around understand that it takes a lot of no's to get to a yes. And so don't think that this is how it goes for every single one. But obviously you heard it took a lot of work for us figuring out what, you know, sort of medium we were going to go down. And we decided to finally do a podcast, and got lucky with the first couple of strikes. So anyway, we went in with them. They gave us an executive right away. We have a creator who's a writer director who had put together the story, who's fantastic, Steve Estev. And so Steve, you know, he led the charge in putting this all together from beginning to end. And the funniest part is, you know, when you get into sort of biographical and true stories, you think you know it all, but as you start really diving in and putting the story together, so much more comes out. And so we thought we had 4 to 6 episodes at the beginning. And then as we began talking to Cookie even more and interviewing her about things, she would all of a sudden pop up and be like, oh my God, I forgot about this story. I got to tell you this insane thing about this helicopter ride I was on that exploded. We had to jump out at the last moment and save the camera crew with us. And we were like, wait, why is that not in the story? Why didn't we hear about this beginning? So next thing you know, we're filling the page with, you know, 3 and 4 more episodes to get where we were to finish it out with 9 episodes. So it was a wild ride. Yeah.
Wow. Tell me about Cookie. So how did she get involved in this story, and how did you all connect with her?
So Cookie, as I said, was born in New Orleans, and was raised between New Orleans and Nicaragua with her family. And so she, again, had a lot of wealthy friends that were in politics. And at that time, there was a lot of turmoil and unease in that country. And she was just a party girl at the time. You know, she was, I think she said she was 19 or 20, you know, when all this stuff really started boiling up. And she knew the language there. She knew the people there. She knew all sides of the factions of that area. So she knew the good, the bad, and the ugly. And all of a sudden, when the journalists started showing up, they became part of, you know, the party circle. People were looking for great stories, but at the same time, they worked hard and they played hard. And she became part of that sort of inner circle and ended up meeting a couple of the American journalists. And one day was just talking to one of them, said, you know, I can get you through Into the Jungle. I know all the people there. And they were like, really? And next thing you know, she became what they call, like I said, the fixer, the person who's getting them into spaces they never thought they could possible. And as she began doing that, she began, you know, hearing the locals' atrocities, and began to collect those stories and give them to the journalists, but also became somebody herself who was very inclined to find the good out of all this, or at least bring some of this information to the Americans that hopefully then bring some good out of all of this. And so she became very involved with that. And so she worked her way up the ranks in journalism very quickly with some of the big boys. And that's how she kind of got her mark. And then Cookie, funny enough, she met Steve Estev, the creator, I think about a decade ago. They ended up meeting in New Orleans, funny enough, through some mutual friends. And Steve's always been a writer, director. I've known him for a long time. I've helped him on a lot of projects. He's a great guy. He's helped a lot of local filmmakers around here while, you know, trying to make his own. And he even said, look, when I first met this woman, I thought she was nuts. She was telling me these stories, and I was like, there's no way any of that's true. And she was like, oh yeah, I'm going to show you one day. And they ended up having coffee one day, and she showed all of her credentials like all of the CBS credentials she had, all the notes, all the war photography with her in it. And all of a sudden his eyes lit up and we're like, okay, I need to pay attention to you. What is it that your story is about? And so over the years, again, they would interview her and write her story out into what we then first started doing into, like I said, an episodic series and pitching it out in that respect.
So this
So
was a
that's kind of how it
multi-year
all got started.
process.
Oh yeah, these types of things are always multi-year. I mean, I have stories that I've been working on for over a decade as well. That I'm passionate about. I know they're going to be great stories, but they're big stories. They're things that I can't set up a camera and interview somebody and get that story out. It's going to take a lot, and a lot of them are, historical. Some of them have happened in the 50s and 60s. That you need to piece together a lot of information to be able to tell those stories. But even some of the ones that you come up with that are part of our modern culture are just they're really tough to get made unless you just want to run around with a camera and throw them up on YouTube and really kind of get things out there. So a lot of the long form stuff ends up taking several years. If I have to say on average, anywhere between 3 and 5 years for a feature film to kind of get off the ground. And people like me who are just, I don't have the connections to New York and Los Angeles. I'm not there on the ground meeting with agencies, meeting with producers on a regular basis. I'm here trying to do it from afar. It takes me a little bit longer, even though I have great resources here. The financing and the distribution end are the two things that really kind of hit the go button on movies and series, and we don't have a lot of that here in Louisiana, so it's a struggle trying to find it. But when you do, man, it usually works itself out in the right direction, like it has with the podcast and a couple of my feature films, and hopefully we'll have a good little run here as we get started.
I love that. So I imagine that because of that location dependence, that you must have a different playbook than other people who are in your same position. Is that the case?
So I have a very unique position because you're right. Because I started as an actor and then I worked my way into um, an editor who could see how the control of the project works. I almost tell people this all the time. Like they always say, "Oh, I want to be a filmmaker." I'm like, "Well, what do you want to do? A filmmaker is to us as producers, that is a director or it's a creative producer. Like you're a filmmaker. Okay, you creatively produce or you direct projects." So when people are coming up, they're like, "Oh, I want to be a filmmaker." I'm like, "Well, you need to understand what type of filmmaker you want to be. You also need to understand almost all aspects of film. And the number one place I tell people to start is go learn editing. Because once you can see what you have to play with and all of the assets that you can put together that make the story work, then you know what to go out and get next time. It's like, oh no, I needed that B-roll shot, or man, I needed that shot of the hand coming in, or God, a shot of the eyes would really kind of pronounce how this actor really feels right now. Understanding how to actually pick all those things up really make you a better storyteller in the filmmaking process. And so I always give people that advice. And so I took that route. Like I said, I got into acting. I then figured out, oh, let me get into editing where the control is. And then I needed to understand all the details. How do I work a camera? How do I get great audio? Because without great audio, your story is nowhere, like what we're doing right now. It's very important. And so understanding all of those aspects of film really help you, one, obviously tell a great story, but two, makes you very accessible and very valuable when you're looking to start putting your work in and start getting paid for the things that you want to get done. So
That's amazing. Yeah, that makes sense because it's like you become a more valuable person to work with. So you
yeah,
like build a brand. I would love to double click on something. You had said earlier that you had had a lot of intellectual property projects and that podcasting was somehow a bridge to curating an audience to funnel that through. Am I getting that right?
yeah, you're absolutely right. So
And when you saying intellectual property projects, those are not podcasts, those are films, correct?
so listen, intellectual property is to me is story rights or life rights of characters, or stories as in articles and books. That's to me what I use in the intellectual property space. People use it for many other different aspects, but to me, I would go out and option books. I would option rights, life rights from folks to tell their story, and that is sort of the dozen projects that I was working on, that are sometimes the toughest, like I said, to get off the ground. And so as you're building a package, which can be a bunch of marketing material to try and sell the project, you're also packaging where you're trying to get hold of a team. And in that team, you really want to find a filmmaker, a director, or a creative producer, a star, and those are sort of the attachments you're trying to get hold of early on. And it became so tough for us to end up doing that. We went another approach, which was, well, let's find a way to get them to come to us. Let's go find a way to build an audience where they need to listen to us because everybody else is. And it's like, oh man, that thing took off. It got 200,000 hits in the first 2 months. We need to pay attention to that story over there. That was our mindset. And so that's what we started doing. We began pitching. Again, we pitched 5 or 6 of our IPs that were ready to go in that space. And we saw that, like I said, Journalista was sort of the one that was moving to the front that we knew we could lay down and really complete rather quickly and turn it over. And so that was the one that obviously picked up some steam, and iHeart connected himself to it.
Yeah, I know I had heard of it, even before connecting with Chris or anything.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Congratulations. So, how has that played out? How has that played out concretely? Have you been able to find a star? Have you been able to find a creative director? Have you been able to, can you walk me through? Because the thesis is really trying to dig in and double click on the specific ways that it actually has translated into real world impacts, how podcasting is played out in the real world.
So the answers are yes. I can't give you any specific names at this moment because we're really working on. They're not attached yet.
That's
But
fine.
what
Just
ended up
A, B,
happening,
C, that's
yeah.
okay.
What ended up happening was it launched in August. It went to the top 5 in 1 month, and it stayed in the top 10, I think, for about 2 or 3 months. And it began to, we were actually worried because obviously you've got all this steam rolling, and all of a sudden the last episode drops, and then the steam starts, heading downhill because nobody else has the next week's episode to be anxiously awaiting. And so we were getting a little nervous. We were like, man, I guess that's going to be it for this run, right? And then you go out and you try to promote it in as many ways as you can. So we went on other podcasts. And so we were getting Cookie interviewed on some other larger podcasts to really find other audience members and connect with people who knew nothing about her story, and to obviously push them over to iHeart to get them to listen. And so we began doing that, doing a lot of marketing and advertising. Doing some social campaigning, really pushing how it is we can get the story out. And then we started to get a couple of calls. iHeart started to get a couple of calls and saying, hey, there's a couple of doc series companies that are very interested in making this into a doc series. You want to talk to them? And so we were open to everything and anything. We were like, look, let's just let's jump on and see what they have to say, what they have to offer. And you had anywhere from folks saying, hey, we want to option this, and then we want to go try and sell it to a platform with you. Or we had others saying, hey, we want to pay you to for us to come in and really produce this for you, and then go put it out on a platform. And so all those things began to get interesting, but you really have to pay attention to who's doing the offer and who you want to partner with in anything in life, but especially in the film industry. And so we just sat back, we took a breath, and we're like, let's be patient on this. We have 4 or 5 opportunities here that have come up. These are all fantastic. And then again, we had another connection. One of the other producing partners, Sean Donnelly, his brother is a big talent agent in town. He's actually a manager now, and he manages some really huge names. And he sent it to one of them. I was like, look, this is a bit of a Hail Mary, but I know he's interested in sort of the Latino market. And this is a crossover between the US and Latino market. Maybe he would like this. And so they sent him the podcast and the pitch deck that we had. And within a week, he literally called and was like, oh, I know this story. We're doing this story. And he was like, oh, okay. All right, then let's go. And so next thing you know, we had Sean and Steve on a call with him. And it wasn't one of these sort of, oh, let me ask these guys the right questions to see if this is the right story and if it's going to be the right fit. It was literally like, oh no, I'm doing this. This is an awesome story. I've got to tell this story. And so it was another sort of, man, we kicked the door wide open and we found the exact partner we want. And now we're working with him as a director, and he's currently wanting to put it in as a 8 to 10 episode series, 8 to 10 episode doc series. But he wants to formulate it into a episodic series right after that. So this is sort of the perfect world of what we want. We've started with wanting to do episodic. We went in making a podcast. We're getting a doc series out of it, and then an episodic series that will follow that. So that's all in the works. And in between those, just to let you know, we sent it to big stars who had a particular interest in it, but wouldn't attach themselves yet because they were sort of waiting on, well, who is the filmmaker that I'll be working with, i.e. the director or the creative producer. And so we began a lot of that process. And so now we've hopefully got that person. There's no paperwork signed, but there is a lot of verbal acceptance on how we're going to go about this project. So that's where we are right now.
Wow. So it tapped into the ecosystem of the film industry. It tapped into recruiting for talent. It tapped into brand building. It tapped into marketing the story in and of itself. That's very impressive. You know, this is the only podcast that I've interviewed of the 12 so far, now 13, where it was an entire production as opposed to an interview form podcast. And for me, that's really exciting because like this medium has so much potential in so many different ways, and people are using it so differently. So I can really see the vision of you're building a brand, you're building a story, you're building a name. You have to do it from afar. You have to do it on a relatively lower budget than New York and LA. And so targeted podcast it's part of the appeal that podcasts are inexpensive to produce. Was that one of the factors? Was there
100%.
Okay. And how much does
Absolutely.
budgeting come into the strategy behind your marketing choices and behind your creative decisions?
Well, if you're asking about budgeting for marketing, that's something you want to hold as many dollars as you can when the marketing timing is right. Because if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to listen to it. And so you have to be able to account for, I would say, 25 to 30% of your overall budget in marketing, and
Yeah.
figure out and finding the right person to market your podcast to. Because some people will tell you they know how to do it, but they don't end up spending it in the right direction. So, we had a great partner in iHeart who put up a ton of money for marketing. And that's really a lot what they did. They gave us cash to make the project, to pay the people who are going to be working on it and editing in it, and licensing the music, because we have great music in it. We actually had a composer came in because we really wanted some really great 80s music that we knew we were never going to be able to afford. So we went out and composed that. And so a lot of those pieces come into play. And so it really depends on what kind of podcast and what kind of project you're putting together. Ours had big elements of episodic series. So again, you had a multitude of characters from all over the world, also big name journalists. You had, like I said, composing and licensing of music. You had an editor, and then we had a sound effects guy, because there's a lot of things happening. You're in a war. We wanted it to sound like she was talking, and there was action going on while she's talking that puts you in the war. And so we had a sound effects guy come in and do a lot of post sound effects. And then we wanted to do it highly professional. So, we went to Esplanade Studios here in New Orleans, who's probably one of the best sound recording studios here in the New Orleans area. And those guys over there were awesome and really put this together really, really well. And then when we were ready to launch, we went into the marketing regime and put some good dollars into marketing and pushed it out there as much as we could, along with iHeart. And here we are today, talking about a successful podcast moving into another medium, which is what the whole goal was.
Unbelievable. And you said that you launched a couple other ones as well. I see that there's On the Neutral Ground, and that you're co-hosting that one as well, correct?
So I actually started that before COVID, funny enough. So I think it's 4 or 5 years old. And the reason I did that is, and I haven't done it in a couple of years. The reason I did that was I would get phone calls here at the studio like, hey, man, I want to be an actor, or I want to get on set. How do I work on a set? I want to be a grip or an electric, or eventually want to be a director of photography. And so what advice do you have? And so me, I'd give them my story, but I'm just one person. And I also have not worked in a lot of those departments exclusively. And so I said, why don't I grab those folks and give them an opportunity and a platform to really tell everybody out there what are the best opportunities to go about this path of wanting to be a director, an actor, in all of these other regimes. And so I did. I started literally my first podcast was, let me bring in a casting director here in town and say, hey, I'm Joe Blow coming off the street. I know nothing about this industry, but I've today decided I want to be an actor. What is your advice to me on how I can eventually become an actor? And then we took an hour-long podcast to talk about that. Hell, here's how you set up your headshots. Here's where you need to go for acting lessons. Here's the best way to actually record yourself for auditions. And so we go through that process. And the same thing, I brought a director of photography in. I brought, a director in, I brought a writer in, I brought a entertainment lawyer to come in and talk to them about, hey, understand your rights, understand how to set up the intellectual property so that you are going through this process correctly. So that potentially, if you raise enough money, you can, apply for tax credits here and maybe even get more money to enhance your project. So that was the whole goal behind that on the neutral ground. And then it swelled into us really talking about entertainment in general. And unfortunately, like I said, some crazy stuff happened in our world that caused me to press pause on that. And then I began doing some PSAs on my couch, which were more or less just me giving the industry some entertainment news. And then as things, hit the strike, we kind of hit a pause on everything to figure out what we were going to do here in Louisiana. And now we're back up and rolling again. And so I'm really excited to kind of get those mediums back up and running.
Unbelievable. So you do plan on starting that one back up?
Yeah, I'm really I'm working with my marketing team to figure out what's going to be the next best approach of that. But I plan on getting those things started back up again.
Fantastic. Question for you. You think that over the course of making that podcast, by bringing in the lawyer, by bringing in all of these people that are specialized, did you learn something that informed the decisions that you make in other projects in your business?
Listen, I'm learning something now. I learned something in every experience in life. So the answer is yes, because I had an
Fantastic.
opportunity again to meet people that I might have never had, an hour to sit with them at all. And so by me being able, it was my curiosity at the end of the day that was helping people that were contacting me, but I was also getting a massive amount of information out of the ordeal. So
Right.
100%. I love
Right.
those types of podcasts for my own individual reasons and respects, but also to obviously help others at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're creating a portfolio for them of like that's online, digital, it's evergreen. They can log on anytime, click on it, and
Mhm.
it gives access to an entire industry, to an entire field where a lot of people feel passionate, but they don't know how to take a step forward. I think that's amazing because it's like there's a community service, there's a giving back, a paying it forward element too. And I really fucking love that.
Well, 100%. I mean, you have to think about it. Like I was in their position, if not a lesser position, at one point in time in my life. I mean, listen, as I told you, I wanted to be an actor, so I became an actor. I went to film school here in New Orleans at UNO, and I loved UNO. UNO was great; it taught me a ton. But what they taught me was the art of filmmaking, and I was constantly asking, "Great, I can continue making art, but how am I going to get the money to make it over and over again? How do I
Yeah.
build a career out of it? And then if I make it, what do I do with it? Where do I sell it? Where do I go with it?" And so they didn't have those answers, unfortunately. And so I was always seeking those types of answers. So if I was seeking that type of opportunity and those types of answers, and they weren't here in Louisiana, I had to seek it from consultation outside. And those ended up being the people that I worked with in some of the bigger movies. And at the end of the day, I wanted to help the people that were in my position at that age. Like, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I was asking those same questions. Let me give you an opportunity to get some of that information so that maybe you can take a shorter run for what I took a longer run of learning and understanding in your career path. And so at the end of the day, look, I'm a Louisiana guy. I love Louisiana. And I want more Louisianas working in this industry, and I need them to be as ready and skill set as possible. So if I can give them the tools, even just from my own experiences, then I hope that that gets them into a position in a quicker format so they can get down the path of driving a career in this industry.
That's unbelievable. Thank you so much for taking the time with this. I've learned a lot, and
Yeah,
this has been amazing. This has been amazing. I've been so
great meeting
excited.
you, my
Like
friend.
everybody I've talked to, I've learned something new from. It's got me more excited about podcasting. When I finish this, I'm going to be launching my own podcast. I'm going to be posting all the interviews on the Cal Zone, if that's all right with you. It's my podcast on Spotify, and it's something that I see like it's a tool that I definitely want to use, and in my career as a way to like meet people, learn new things, open my mind to a new perspective and a new like way of seeing the world, and I'm loving it.
Hey, curiosity is what keeps us all alive. Keep doing that and build a podcast off of that, and you will. I can see you. The sky is the limit for you, my friend. I do have to ask the Cal Zone. I love the name, obviously, but what is the premise? Is it just interviews, or is there any specific through line you're going to follow? What is it you got?
Yeah, so the first through line, the first 12 episodes, well, now 13, are going to be the thesis interviews, and it's going to be how podcasts can help businesses in all the different ways. So exploring the whole scope. different ways podcasts have entrepreneurs and especially social entrepreneurs who have a mission, because it tends to be people who actually like care about something bigger than just selling paper clips who ended up starting a podcast. And how they're using it to bridge the gap, and how they're connecting with their audience, but as well as their guests, and how they're connecting with the ecosystem of people around them who share that mission. And that's just opened up so many doors. And from there, I want to see, mission two, through line number two would be, I'm 24 years old, just finishing my master's degree, starting my career, trying to figure out like what the problems in the world are locally, as well as like think global, act local type mindset,
Hmm.
and what I can do to contribute to helping solve them, and how I can use a podcast as a tool to make that happen in conjunction with any projects I can be of service with. So those are the two through lines to start off with, and we'll see how it grows organically.
That's awesome. I didn't know if y'all were gonna talk, business over a tasty calzone from all of the places in and around your city. I didn't know where you were going with that, but I
I
love the
hope
name.
so.
It's awesome.
I hope so. Come on. Well, Jason Waggenspack, you're the best. I hope to talk sometime soon, and I'm wishing you all the best of luck. I'm gonna be following this story with Journalista. I'm a fan.
Thank you, bud. Great talking to you. Look forward to hearing your podcast again very soon.
Fantastic. Peace.
Later.